Alright, so over the past couple of months since Wimbledon, something weird has been going on, and I'm sure many of you have noticed it as well. Ever since sustaining that ab injury in the second week of Wimbledon, Rafael Nadal has been nowhere near the same player that he was prior to it, where to that point he had been the player of the season. And comparing that to every showing he's had since the ab injury, and he has looked nothing like the player resembling that one that he was prior. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about his struggles as of late, whether it's the sign of things to come, or if you can mark this stretch down more as fluky with an explanation behind his struggles. So to highlight, since Wimbledon we've seen a round of 32 first match exit in Cincinnati, we have seen a round of 16 loss at the US Open, and most recently yesterday we saw a round of 32 opening match loss in Paris. And throughout this albeit short stint, there have been quite a couple of common themes, with Nadal's game just not clicking in really most facets of the game. The, trademark Nadal baseline game that's typically so watertight. A lot of uncharacteristic unforced errors there from offensive positions. Even when the misses aren't coming in neutral balls, the depth just not being there. That's a lot of what Tommy Paul really took advantage of yesterday. What feels like an increasingly more frequent amount of just easy missed returns. And probably most concerningly, in all three of those events and the losses he sustained, he looked sluggish and slow at the end of those matches. Now, one thing I didn't mention in that was the serving, and that's really why I personally have given a pass to everything through Laver Cup, attributing pretty much all of that to the ab injury still not being completely recovered. I think that was pretty clear to see up through Laver Cup. Rafa was sporting that abbreviated serve motion with a lower toss, and as a result you saw so many more double faults. Even for Nadal serving speeds not getting the MPHs that he regularly does on both first and second serves. And so with the ab limiting how much you can extend, not just only limiting to the serve, but in other facets of the game as well, I've written off, the rough patch for Rafa, really just to the ab not fully being healed yet. And that changed yesterday against Tommy Paul in his opener in Bercy, where his serve looked normal. Both first and second serves looked back to their normal pace. Rafa finally looked like he had his serve back to normal, and this was a match that for the first half, aside from going down an early break, Nadal had in his control for the better part of the match. I didn't really feel that either guy was playing anything out of the ordinary. It was pretty standard stuff for a set and a half. Nadal had a couple of spectacular forehand highlights, but save that, was pretty ordinary tennis. But still a match that, up a set and getting an early break in the second, it seemed like Nadal had it under control and seemed to be poised to cruise to a straight set victory, but the wheels pretty much fell off immediately after he broke in the second set, played a horrendous game to be broken right back. And from that point on, Tommy Paul really was reinvigorated. He outplayed Rafa the rest of that second set. Had Nadal serve under pressure the entirety of the second set, very well could have ended it before a second set tiebreaker. But anyways, he controlled that breaker early and deservedly took that second set. Third set is where all the red flags came in. Rafa got broken playing a poor game in, I believe, the first game of the third. And, the fight left him pretty quickly, very uncharacteristically so. He had a few openings, and I believe the next two Tommy Paul service games didn't take them, and after that, he really went down very meekly. It seemed like he had expended the last of his energy in those two Paul service games after initially being broken, trying to get the break back. When he didn't get him, he looked unrecognizable pretty much the rest of the set. He was serve volleying a lot, really just trying to get points over with as quick as possible. Pretty much just checked out of this match in the second half of that third set. He looked utterly winded, and he might have been sick to my eye. I didn't really see any of the post-match press stuff to get an idea of what he said in his assessment of the match. But again, the fatigue is another thing that's been following him in that pattern ever since, the end of his Wimbledon run. Stamina being something that seemed to have been completely revitalized in the first half of Rafa's 2022 season, but that too just has not been there in the second half of the year. So ultimately, coming away from yesterday's match, I do find myself in a rare and unique position as a Nadal fan where I actually can fathom an incoming decline. And at the same time, I'm not really completely concerned with this run of form over the last couple of months, and I'll tell you why. As I said earlier, I marked up pretty much everything through Laver Cup as I just felt like Nadal's ab was not 100% yet. He did confirm that at Laver Cup. He said that he felt like he re-aggravated it at the US Open, and that really shouldn't be that hard to believe given the way that he was serving. And really, it's that injury where I really do think that it all begins, because Rafa just has not been getting his match play in, wasn't ready in time for Canada. I feel like he kind of rushed back for Cincinnati, but he needed to heading into the US Open. Goal was to get matches under his belt there, and it didn't happen because Borna Coric happened to play the best tournament of his life pretty much out of nowhere, and that's actually one of the losses that I don't think Nadal played all that poorly in. It was just the serving that was clearly hampered by the ab. But honestly, that's probably the best match I would assess in this run of form since Wimbledon. Obviously, he was still probably looking to go deep at the US Open, and when he didn't, that had to be quite the disappointment. The level never really clicked in New York this year, but, he had a child on the way in less than a month, and of course seemed like he wasn't really physically 100% anyways. Took time off in between again after the US Open, and within that break, having to recover as well as having his son being born, it would be perfectly understandable to fathom that the training was not, up to his usual rigor. So obviously nobody expected Nadal to be in tip-top shape in his return to match action in Paris. Add on, this is by far his least successful part of the tennis calendar on indoor hard courts. It really was just a perfect storm, as well as Tommy Paul being a tough opening match draw. And certainly even going into that match, I did see the upset potential there. I wouldn't have been surprised if Paul pulled the upset. I just didn't think it would happen. And, it did end up happening. And it did happen in such a fashion where I was left thinking that, of course I didn't expect Rafa to be in tip-top shape right out of the gates in Paris, but I also did not expect him to look that bad. And that's kind of why I began by saying, for the first time in a very long time, I actually can fathom the idea of an incoming Nadal decline. We can mark it up to whatever we want, but at the same time, yesterday the ab looked fine, and, the fact is that we haven't seen Nadal bring it since Wimbledon. It's been a while, and we're going to need to see it. The match play hasn't been there, but at the same time, he's going to need to start winning more matches as well to give himself the chance to play more. And the fact is that just hasn't been the case over the last couple of months. Given the circumstances, you could say it's probable that he won't make it out of his group in Turin, which he stated that he intends on playing. If that does end up being the case, again, I stand by what I said earlier. I still wouldn't be concerned. Indoor hard courts, obviously, Nadal's least preferred stretch of the year. Although, side note, he's not as crappy as some people make him out to be. He's not exceptional on indoor hard courts, but he is still above average. I mean, the guy has a Masters title there, and I believe 5 out of 9 times in Bercy he's made the semis when he's played, and 6 out of 10 times he's made the semis of the Tour finals, 2 finals there as well. Still pretty solid, just not up to his own standards everywhere else. But again, that being said, he's typically burnt out at this point in the year. I wouldn't say that's the case right now, but in general, indoor swing comes, motivation isn't at its highest without a major there. That being said, I will be concerned and the alarm bells will be going off for me if this persists into Australia and early next year. As I said earlier, we haven't seen Rafa at his typical level since Wimbledon. It's been quite a while, and because of that, I do think that this is something to be on the lookout for heading into next year. Australia, on the other hand, has always been a place that he's done pretty well at. He's been uber consistent there in spite of just the 2 titles. And it's because of that that I am still kind of optimistic that he will get himself back into the groove at the beginning of next season after the whole off season with the training blocks there. That being said, as I said earlier, this is one of the very rare times in my tenure as a Rafael Nadal fan where if you tell me that you think Nadal's on his last legs and near the end, I would say I can see where you're coming from. I always believed he'd be back from that 2012 knee injury. There was never any doubt in my head about that. Even through 2015 and most of 2016, it took till the end of 2016 when Nadal lost to Puig, where, admittedly at the time, I did think he was done. But since then, and since his comeback in 2017, it seems like every end of the season since 2017 has seemed like Nadal is at a crossroads and he's ended the year, not as strong as he began it. Even last year when he fell at Roland Garros and took the rest of the season off, I still felt like I was in the minority back then, that I thought that Nadal still had some juice in the tank, and obviously it showed this year. But I will admit that at the end of this season, with how drastic his form from the beginning to mid-year to the end of it has been, as well as the fact that he's just 36 years old now, I do kind of have to acknowledge that it is a possibility. But I would still give him some leeway through Australia next year to see how he looks then. I do expect him to play better at the very least in Turin next week than he showed this week. Given how the groups are kind of stacked at the Tour Finals this year, making a semi-final probably would put those doubts at ease a bit as well. Looks to be pretty unlikely at the moment, but, we'll see. But that will do it for this video. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, it would be much appreciated if you could drop a like, help this video perform better in YouTube's algorithm, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you again so much for watching, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.